Welcome to Criminal Conversations, where your hosts will take you through some of the most fascinating crime stories in under 20 minutes. If you're looking for a quick and engaging deep dive into the world of true crime, you've come to the right place.
Welcome back to Criminal Conversations. We dissect true crime, get to the bottom of things. Today we're diving into a case that's shocking but also kind of familiar. It's about catfishing. But this is not like your typical Tinder swindler. This is Sweet Bobby, and you won't believe who's behind it all.
This case is really interesting because it shows how vulnerable we are when it comes to trust online. We'll look at how manipulation can actually change reality. It makes the victim doubt themselves, what they see, what they hear. It's a scary reminder that anyone can be a victim in the online world.
We're talking about Kirat Assi. She's a successful radio presenter from London. She was a victim of a really complex catfishing scam. And the person behind it was someone she thought she could trust. Imagine having your whole life, all your plans, everything you believe in, just crumbling because it's all built on lies.
To really understand how this happened, we're using a few sources. We have Kirat's story from the Netflix documentary Sweet Bobby, My Catfish Nightmare. That was based on the podcast by Tortoise Media. And then we also have some news articles about the legal battles and what happened afterward. As we dig deeper, think about the red flags, how someone could be manipulated, and how the online world makes that so much easier.
So let's start at the beginning. Our story starts back in 2010 with Kirat Assi. She's a successful radio presenter living in London. She had a great career, a busy social life, close family. Life was good for Kirat. But that was about to change. It all started when she connected with a guy named Bobby John Doe on Facebook. It seemed pretty normal at first. He said he was a cardiologist, and this is important, he was friends with some of Kirat's cousins on Facebook already.
Think about how you use social media. Have you ever become friends with someone online because you have mutual friends? Yeah, it's a really common thing, right? But this case shows how that sense of trust, because they're in the same Sikh community, especially with connections to Kenya where a lot of British Sikhs have family, well, it made Kirat more vulnerable to what was coming next.
It's like that shared background. It made it easier for Kirat to trust him. At first, their messages were just casual, but it quickly became something more. Bobby started sharing personal stories, things he was struggling with, stuff about his family. It's understandable why Kirat would be interested. This wasn't just some random person online. He seemed stable, successful, and genuinely interested in her.
And don't forget, Bobby was supposedly a cardiologist, which made him seem even more trustworthy. Like subconsciously you think, well, a doctor has to be a good person.
Right.
Catfishers use this a lot to seem more credible and make victims less suspicious.
But then Bobby started breaking his promises. He would always have a reason why they couldn't meet in person. Canceled trips last minute, always some excuse about family or health problems, and this went on for years. Kirat must have been on an emotional roller coaster. Every time she thought she was finally going to meet this man, something would happen.
There's one incident that really stands out. It happened at a nightclub in Brighton. Kirat was there for a friend's bachelorette party, and guess who she bumped into? Bobby. She tried to say hi, but he acted like he didn't even know her, claimed he didn't remember her. That should have been a huge red flag, a big hole in his story. But Kirat was already invested, and she just brushed it off. It shows how powerful the desire to connect with someone can be. Sometimes we ignore really obvious signs.
And the manipulation, it got even worse. Every time he canceled a meeting, Bobby's excuses would get more and more crazy. He even pretended to have a heart attack on the phone while they were arguing. And then, to make matters worse, one of his supposed cousins called Kirat and blamed her for stressing Bobby out. It's crazy how far he was willing to go to keep up the lie.
And it wasn't just Bobby. He created a ton of fake Facebook profiles. Family members, friends, even medical staff, they all seem to back up his stories. This is called toxic triangulation. They use multiple sources to reinforce a lie, making it almost impossible for the victim to see what's really happening. It's like an echo chamber of lies meant to shut down any doubts the victim might have.
They built this whole fake world around Kirat, making it harder and harder to escape. But even with all these lies, Kirat started to have doubts. Years of excuses and unanswered questions finally pushed her to her limit. She knew something wasn't right, and she was determined to find out the truth. So she hired a private investigator. What did she find out?
What the investigator found was shocking. Bobby's real address was nothing like what he'd told her. The man she thought she knew, the man she had been in love with for years, he didn't even exist.
Kirat took that information and went to confront Bobby at his real address. I can't imagine what she felt. Showing up at the door of someone you think you love and a complete stranger answers? This Bobby had no clue who Kirat was or why she was there. What a horrible realization.
Yeah, it completely shattered Kiret's world. Everything she believed came crashing down. It's hard to comprehend that level of betrayal. But the story doesn't end there. As Kirat tried to figure out how she could have been so tricked, another twist came to light, something even more shocking than what she had already learned.
As Kirat was standing there processing everything, her cousin Simran showed up. Remember, Simran's the one who initially told Kirat about Bobby and made him seem more legit.
And then, unbelievably, Simran admitted that she was behind Bobby's profile. It was Simran the whole time. She was the puppet master, playing with Kirat's life like a game.
Wait, what? Her own cousin, the one she talked to, shared everything with. She was the one behind this whole thing.
Yes, her second cousin. It was a huge betrayal that destroyed family trust. And this just brought up even more questions. Why would she do it? What could possibly motivate someone to do something so cruel to their own family?
Welcome back to Criminal Conversations. Before we go any further, let's recap. We found out that Sweet Bobby was totally made up, right? It was all Simran Bogle, Kirat's own second cousin. It's even more scary when you think about how carefully Simran tricked everyone. She didn't just fool Kirat, she made a whole network of people believe her lies.
It's mind-blowing that she could keep it up for so long. But when we look closer at what Simran did, we see that Kirat wasn't the only one she was fooling.
Remember Bobby Jondu, the guy Simran was pretending to be? Well, Simran had also been catfishing his younger brother, JJ, and she used similar tricks, even bolder ones.
Wait, she catfished the brother of the guy she was already pretending to be? This is getting weirder and weirder. What did she do to JJ? Simran invented a whole new group of fake people to get JJ involved. She even went as far as faking a hit and run to make him feel sorry for her and get closer to him. This wasn't just some random mean thing. It was all planned out to mess with his emotions and gain his trust.
It's like she was playing a real-life video game, controlling everyone around her with these made-up stories. And get this, Simran was catfishing JJ while they were actually dating in real life.
Exactly. She was catfishing her own boyfriend. She was living this double life. It makes you wonder, what was going on in her head? What was she trying to get out of all this?
It's a level of deception that's hard to understand. But for Kirat, the most important thing was getting justice after all the manipulation and pain. So what happened? Did Simran face any consequences?
Well, that's where it gets complicated. Kirat went to the police in 2018 wanting to hold Simran accountable, but she quickly found out that catfishing on its own wasn't actually a crime in the UK at that time.
It's hard to believe that something so emotionally damaging wasn't even considered a crime.
It shows how our laws are sometimes behind when it comes to technology. They haven't caught up with how people interact online. Cases like this are forcing them to rethink the laws and consider the new challenges of online deception.
So if they couldn't press charges, what could Kirat do? Was she supposed to just forget about it and move on?
Not at all. The police couldn't really do anything because of the law, but they suggested Kirat sue Simran. It wasn't criminal charges, but it was a way to hold Simran responsible.
Okay, so she went to court. What were the charges? What was she hoping to get out of it?
The lawsuit, which was filed in 2020, claimed that Simran misused Kirat's personal information. She also accused her of harassment and breaking data protection laws. Kirat wanted a public apology and money for all the emotional distress and damage Simran had caused. It wasn't just about the catfishing, it was about all the years of manipulation, the emotional ups and downs, and the huge betrayal.
It couldn't have been easy to sue, knowing how emotionally draining it would be. How did Simran react? Did she try to keep it quiet or show any remorse?
Not even close. Instead of admitting what she did or trying to settle things peacefully, Simran hired these really tough lawyers. They completely denied she had anything to do with it and even tried to turn the blame on Kirat.
Are you serious? How could they possibly justify that after she already confessed?
Simran's lawyers tried to make her look like the victim. They said she was young and vulnerable, and Kirat, who was older, had manipulated her into this whole thing. They even used the word grooming, which is just crazy. They were trying to make it look like Kirat was the bad guy.
It's disgusting that they would use such tactics to basically make Kirat the villain after everything she'd been through. Did they have any evidence to support their claims, or was it just a desperate attempt to stop the lawsuit?
They never showed any real evidence. It seemed like a strategy to make Kirat look bad and pressure her into dropping the case so Simran wouldn't be held accountable. They even threatened to make these accusations public if Kirat didn't back down.
It's awful that Kirat had to deal with that on top of everything else. But she didn't give up. To her credit, she refused to be silenced. She wanted justice, and she was determined to expose the truth and make Simran answer for what she did, no matter the cost.
Absolutely. It shows how strong and determined Kirat is. She wasn't going to let Simran control the story anymore. Even though she was facing tough lawyers and the stress of the trial, she stayed strong and kept fighting for recognition and justice.
It's really inspiring to see that kind of courage. But going through this in court must have been really hard on her, both emotionally and financially. So, what happened? Did Kira get her day in court?
It went on for months, lots of legal back and forth and emotional stress. Finally, in the spring of 2021, they reached a settlement.
So it was resolved somehow. What were the terms? Did Simran admit she was guilty? Did Kirat get the public apology she wanted?
As part of the settlement, Simran agreed to pay Kirat a lot of money for the harm she caused. She also wrote an apology, but there was a problem. It was confidential. Kirat could only share it with a few people.
So no public apology, no public admission of guilt. It must have been so frustrating for Kirat, especially after she fought so hard for recognition and justice.
It was a hard decision, but after talking to her lawyers, Kirat decided to accept the settlement. It was a practical choice. She had to weigh the desire for public vindication against the emotional and financial strain of a long legal battle that might not even get her what she wanted.
It really shows how limited the legal system is when it comes to online deception, especially in cases like this where the harm is emotional and psychological.
Exactly. And even though the settlement gave her some closure, Kirat's journey wasn't over. She still had to deal with the emotional scars of what Simran did and the frustration that there wasn't a criminal investigation. Remember, the police initially dropped the case because there wasn't a specific law against catfishing.
But then there was all that attention on the case, right,
Yeah.
from the podcast and the Netflix documentary. Did that have any impact on the legal side of things?
You're right. The media played a big part. Because of all the public attention and pressure from the Sweet Bobby podcast and the documentary, the Metropolitan Police decided to reopen the investigation. It was a small win and showed that public pressure and media coverage can influence what happens in these cases.
At least that gave some hope that justice could still be served, even if it was delayed. So where's Simran Bogle now? Has she faced any real consequences for what she did?
After everything settled down, Simran basically disappeared. She left her big job at the bank, her reputation ruined by what she did. No one knows where she is for sure, but she said she's not happy with all the media attention.
Sounds like she's trying to avoid any more scrutiny and responsibility. Do we know anything about what she's thinking or why she did all this?
Unfortunately, Simran stayed quiet, letting her lawyers do the talking. The only thing we have from her is that confidential apology letter she sent to Kirat as part of the settlement.
What does it say? Is it sincere? Does she try to explain herself? Does it tell us anything about why she went to such extremes?
The letter admits that she caused pain, but it feels kind of forced and insincere. It doesn't really explain why she did it or what was going on in her head. It's almost like she's still trying to control things, even in her apology, instead of really taking responsibility for her actions.
It leaves you with an unsettling feeling and so many unanswered questions. Why did Simran do it? Was she trying to control things? Did she need attention? Was it some kind of twisted game for her or something else entirely? Welcome back to Criminal Conversations. We've spent the last two parts digging into Sweet Bobby. It's this crazy story about catfishing, but it turned into something so much bigger, a huge betrayal that really messed people up. But now that we're at the end, I keep thinking about what this whole thing means, like what happens next.
That's a good point, because this story goes way beyond just Kirat and Simran. It got the whole world talking about online safety, what catfishing does to people, and how our laws need to change to deal with online deception. It's a wake-up call that the internet can connect us in amazing ways, but it also makes it easier to manipulate and hurt people.
It's a story that really hits home for anyone who spends time online.
Yeah.
So to wrap things up, let's go back to the people at the center of it all. Where are Kirat and Simran now? Have they been able to move on from all this?
For Kirat, it's been a long and tough road. She's had to rebuild her life, deal with the emotional damage, the financial stress from the court case, and the fact that her reputation was hurt. It's pretty amazing that she's been able to talk about her story and push for change.
I'm glad to hear that. What about Simran? Has she faced any real consequences for what she did? I mean, besides the settlement?
Well, remember how the Metropolitan Police said they were going to reopen the investigation? That was after all the public attention from the podcast and the Netflix documentary. But as of right now, Simran hasn't been charged with anything.
That's got to be frustrating for Kirat. And for anyone who wants to see real justice done.
It is. And it shows how difficult it is to prosecute these kinds of cases. The harm is emotional, psychological, and sometimes the laws just aren't equipped to deal with these new types of online crime.
But Simran's actions had consequences, even without a criminal conviction, didn't they?
Oh, for sure. She's lost a lot, socially and professionally. She left her job at the bank and her reputation is ruined. Nobody knows for sure where she is now, but she's made it clear that she's not happy about all the attention.
Seems like she wants to avoid responsibility and fade away.
So, thinking about everything we've learned, what are the main takeaways for our listeners? What can we all learn from Kirat's experience?
Sweet Bobby shows us that we have to be careful online and really think critically. We can't just trust everyone, even people we think we know. It's important to question things, check if things are true, and listen to that gut feeling if something seems wrong.
It's a reminder that we all need to be more aware, more careful, and more proactive when it comes to protecting ourselves and each other online.
Exactly. Technology makes it easier to deceive, but it can also be a way to raise awareness, fight for justice, and connect with people who have been through similar things. Kirat sharing her story has touched so many people, and that shared experience can lead to positive change. I hope this case reminds everyone that we're not alone in the digital world. There are resources and support systems out there. And there's a growing movement to fix the legal loopholes that let people like Simran take advantage of others.
Knowledge is key. If we understand how manipulators work and are careful online, we can make the digital world safer and more trustworthy for everyone.
So as we close out our deep dive into Sweet Bobby, I have one last question for our listeners. What do you think made Simran go to such extremes? Was it about control? Did she crave attention? Was it some sick game, or was it something else entirely? Head over to our social media and share your thoughts and theories. Let's keep talking about this and work together to build a better online world where trust and honesty matter. And that's it for this deep dive into Sweet Bobby. We'll be back soon with another intriguing case, so until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
Thanks for listening to Criminal Conversations. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to rate and review. It makes a huge difference and really helps us out. All of the sources used for today's episode can be found in the show notes. Join us every Monday and Thursday for a new story and another criminal conversation.